Okay, good morning to you all, and a very warm welcome to the South East LEP Major Projects Group Skills webinar. Delighted to have you in attendance today. And just a couple of technical things, a reminder that the event is a webinar. So for all of those of you that have joined us, you won't be able to see yourselves on the screen. Which I'm sure it will be a good thing for some of you, but you can ask questions via the Q&A. So, you know, it's a typical Zoom call. We're all very familiar these days, aren't we? That Q&A button is live at the bottom of your screens. We'd really like your input and engagement, so please do ask questions via that Q&A option. And there's time at the end of our agenda. Hopefully we'll get a chance to pick out a few of those for the panel. So thank you very much for joining us. My name is Jeremy Kurzweil. I'm the principal of Plumpton College. That's my day job at least. Very privileged in that role, as I am also to be the chair of the South East LEP Skills Working Group. A really important coming together of key stakeholders, providers from across Essex, Kent and East Sussex. That does some really important work in terms of the skills agenda across that geographical area, and a lot of sharing of practice and ideas and initiatives as well. I'm also therefore the representative of further education on the LEP strategic board. So I'll be sharing today. As I said, thanks very much for joining us. I think some of you will be aware that we held a similar event last year, providing a bit more information on these incredible major projects taking place across our patch. And so we felt this was a really good opportunity to hear again from the projects, get an update on what they've been doing. I think they've probably all been very, very busy. And particularly to find out a bit more from a skills perspective as well. A recent session was held with that LEP Skills Working Group and representatives from all of the major projects to consider recommendations, a number of recommendations from a skills report, looking at each project and the requirements of them from a talent, workforce, skills development perspective. This includes everything from apprenticeship targets through to work experience and employment support itself, and a full action plan resulting from the deep dive, if you like, that skills report, and that look across the projects has been developed, and it will be shared soon. And the skills working group are meeting later this month to kind of finalise that input. So we'll be sharing that, or Louise will be sharing that in the coming weeks. But today, projects, as I say, are going to give a bit of an update on where they're at, what they've been doing, and hopefully as part of their wider projects updates, tell us what their particular focus is on skills as well. So without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Louise. Many of you will know Louise, of course, Louise Aitken, our skills lead for the South East LEP, who's been coordinating that skills action plan and working with all those different projects along with her colleagues, Sharon and Helen. Over to you, Louise. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. Can I just check you can see my screen before I start? Brilliant, that's the technical part over and done with. So just to give you a little bit of background really as to where we're at and how we got to where we are, just the kind of the basics is the South East Local Enterprise Partnership. I think everybody on the call probably knows, but we're the biggest LEP nationally. We cover East Sussex, Essex, Kent, Medway, Southend and Thurrock. So we are a huge geography. LEPs are set up by government to make investments to drive and create jobs. So that's our core remit. But of course, with skills being fundamental to that and really underpinning a lot of our work, we have, alongside the skills working group that Jeremy chairs, we have a skills advisory panel that's our employer-led panel that drives and oversees our skills work. And we're also part of a national LEP network across the country. So just to explain a little bit more about that skills advisory panel. So most LEPs now have a skills advisory panel we were tasked by the Department for Education with setting up. So that's our employer voice, if you like, and we have been very careful to represent the geography and also different sectors. So we've got some really big employers on there, but we've also got a lot of SMEs, and some of our projects, in fact, are represented on there as well. So that's our employer-led panel. We were lucky enough to have an existing skills strategy that helped us to inform the formation of that panel. And it's very much a sister group, if you like, to the major projects group and work with that. We do get funding from the Department for Education, so we're able to produce regular analysis, and the work we've done with the major projects forms part of that analysis. And the group is chaired by Helen Clements of Morgan Sindall, and she is also a member of the Major Project Skills Group. So as you can see, there's a bit of a golden thread running through everything. And obviously I won't have time to cover everything today. So we have recently produced an executive summary of the work that panel is doing for you to access if you want to. We'll circulate these slides and you'll be able to click on any of the links, but that gives you a bit of an overview of where the panel is, what it's already achieved, and also has some of that data which will soon be refreshing. These are reports that are produced, also published by the DFE, and all LEPs publish theirs, so you can see similar reports for other parts of the country, which I think is quite helpful because you've now got a consistent view of what things look like. And if you've heard about local skills improvement plans, we are aligning with those and feeding into those. This is very much joined up with all of that area of work as well. And just to show you a little bit about how that links in with our major projects. So one of the things the skills advisory panel led on was a careers event and magazine. And as you can see here from the visuals, that included a 2-page spread on the major projects, because one of the things that we found quite early on was awareness of those is really important, and also just bringing them to life really for our kind of education sector. So that's a sort of first start on the way. The event we held in October was a virtual event, and that's the magazine that we've created. And just to touch slightly on the national picture, because obviously in anything we do on skills, it's really important that we're fitting in with the national picture. So the Levelling Up white paper includes a skills mission about high quality skills training. And beneath that, there are quite a lot of different agendas that we need to align with and fit within. I won't read all of these out because, as I say, we will circulate this, but that does include things like the local skills improvement plans, skills boot camps, institutes for technology, of which we have one across the South East now, led by South Essex College, T-levels and apprenticeships, and things like the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And the DFE are also creating the Future Skills Unit, which will help some of that labour market information and informing the picture. So in terms of the major projects work specifically, CELEP set up a major projects group back in 2020, including some of the big projects that are present across our area, really as a result of the fact that there are all of these big projects across our area. And one of the first things that they identified as being an area of need for them was skills and employment. That was one of the crucial things, because there are obviously a lot of skill shortages already in sectors such as construction and engineering. To that end, a skills subgroup was established with skills leads from those projects, and it's many of those that you will be hearing from today. And we now meet bi-monthly. And again, one of the first things that group felt was necessary, working in conjunction with the skills advisory panel, was to produce a report that looked at some of those collective skills needs, that started to quantify them. So we commissioned MACE Group to do a report into those skills needs and where the commonality lies. Obviously, it's not a precise science, it's only a starting point, because the nature of these projects is that their timescales change and their requirements change. So this is very much a starting point, but this is just to kind of share some of the headlines from that report. I think one of the starkest conclusions is that the pipeline of major projects in the CELEP area represents an extraordinary amount of growth and a huge economic opportunity, which I think really puts into kind of focus really the size of the challenge. And we know that that is drawing on sectors that already have shortages, as I say. So it also highlights the significant challenges in meeting the skills and labour demands, but notes the real opportunity that we have to work collaboratively. And I think hopefully part of what you're seeing today is that we already are working collaboratively. And as Jeremy said, we've had sessions with our skills working group, and that combined construction value of 28.5 billion as a conservative estimate, obviously a huge number. And the report starts to quantify some of those job numbers and kind of where they will fall. These will move. We know, for instance, that London Resort is currently kind of on hold. So things like that will impact on the numbers that happen. But the report starts to look at local areas and some of the impact that the projects might have on those. And it also makes a series of recommendations. And that is partly what we're here to talk about today, because based on those recommendations, we are starting to build an action plan. And we would welcome thoughts on that. We have published the emerging actions on our website, which we will share. We can share in the chat probably with you today, but we'll share after the event as well. And the recommendations are, as you can see here, so one of them is for HE, FE providers to collaborate with industry to build that pipeline of job opportunities. Another one is to engage with schools. Recommendation 3 is to make a use of advanced design and manufacturing techniques. Recommendation 4 is about the tutor shortage, because we have a real issue with tutors aligned to our sectors and a real challenge in line with the recruitment challenges more generally. That is a real issue and a bottleneck. An effective supply chain strategy is developed, and that the untapped workforce in the region is harnessed as much as possible. So that's about making, obviously, ensure that it's a really inclusive environment. So again, I won't read all of this out because I'm conscious of time and we've got some brilliant projects to hear from, but it's just to show you that we have started to work with the projects and with our education partners to look at how we respond to those recommendations. In some cases, there are things already happening. So in recommendation 1, we're really fortunate in that we already have some really strong education partnerships. We already work collaboratively across the LEP, and we will, as a skills working group, be meeting later this month to consider more fully some of the findings and how best the education sector can be supported. Things like today's event really stem from recommendation 1, because we're keen to share as widely as possible what's happening. The Institutes for Technology clearly will be an important part of the picture. And then if we look at recommendation 2 about supporting schools, we have things like enterprise advisors, STEM ambassadors, needs for governors. So all of that plays into that ambition. And likewise with the other recommendations, just some examples here of how we might start to tackle this. Things like the tutor shortage, looking at having placements from the projects to help with teaching and just kind of releasing staff, but also working with the supply chain. So all of this is here for you to digest more fully, and we are keen for further input. You know, this is everybody's action plan. We want the projects to have maximum benefit for communities across the LEP. So please do keep in touch. This is just the starting point, really. And in terms of next steps, we will build on that action plan. We will continue to be really transparent about it and share it with you all. And we will build up key performance indicators so that we're measuring what we're achieving together with the projects. And as you will hear today, there's some amazing stuff already happening with individual projects themselves. So I think hopefully you'll be quite inspired by what you hear. We're having a meeting, as I said, later this month to consider more fully the asks from the kind of education side of things. The updated version will be shared and published, and as I say, we would welcome your thoughts and ideas. So that is me. Hopefully I haven't gone too far over time, and I shall stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Louise. Yeah, kind of great to get that context, isn't it? And almost a tantalizing insight, I think, into the collective scale here, and not just the challenges but opportunities that presents us. And you know, that's why we're all here, of course. So thank you very much. I'm delighted to therefore introduce our first project spotlight, and we commence with a focus or spotlight on the Ebbsfleet Garden City project. I won't try and tell you anything about that, but hand over to the person that is going to take us through that project summary and that skills insight. Thank you very much. Lara Paul, over to you.
So having tested the technology, it's now letting me down. Isn't that typical? Bear with me, sorry. Only wants to share my entire screen. Okay, Amy, I might need you to assist here, please.
Okay, I've got the presentation up, Laura.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Okay, so sorry about that, everybody. I just wanted to give you an overview of Ebbsfleet Garden City and what we've achieved in the last 12 months, and also what the next steps are as well. So assuming I'm going to have to ask Amy to do the next slide, please. Here we go. So in terms of location, and I'll run through this very quickly because we don't have a lot of time, and some of you may have been on the webinar that we did 12 months ago. But basically, Ebbsfleet Garden City is located between Dartford and Gravesend, and in fact, the boundary for the two boroughs goes right the way through the middle of the Garden City. But we're right next to Bluewater. Connectivity is quite amazing because we've got the A2 and the M25 and also the Dartford crossing, and then the Lower Thames crossing will just be the other side of Gravesend also. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we have achieved so far is it's close to about 3,000 homes to date out of a planned 15,000 homes by 2035. But it's not just about homes, it's about building a garden city, and it will be the first garden city for a century. So there will be 5 new primary schools, we've built 3 already, plus a secondary school, a health and wellbeing hub, major sports facilities, community centres. And the garden city is being built in a garden city model across 8 different what we call neighbourhoods. Next slide, please. The biggest of those neighbourhoods will be Ebbsfleet Central, which is going to be built around Ebbsfleet International Station. So if any of you know this station, you'll appreciate there's lots of outdoor car parking space there. We own that land, so we will be building a high density mixed use centre there that will be the focal point of the garden city. As a garden city, we're expecting to achieve 43% of green and blue space as well. There's a culture and arts focus, a health focus. We are putting allotments in. We have a scheme called Edible Ebbsfleet where residents can grow their own fruit and vegetables. And we're very keen to integrate existing communities, residents and businesses with the brand new communities that we are creating as well. It's not just the building of brand new homes and facilities, but we're also regenerating existing spaces and buildings, and even a lake that's being regenerated. Next screen, please. So our role is to, as Ebbsfleet Development Corporation, is to make sure that the garden city is a good place for developers to come and invest. And to do that, we are bringing in all of the infrastructure, for example, so roads, utilities, we've built a bridge, we're bringing in the fast track bus route with KCC. And for anyone who knows about garden cities, being a transport hub is really important. So it's just some information about all of the different routes and transport options that are available in the garden city. We're also within the Thames Estuary growth area, as well as being within the LEP area, and potentially subject to planning. The London Resort also is just on our doorstep. So next slide, please. Okay, so the Garden City vision from Ebenezer Howard of 1898 shows how small neighbourhoods can fit around one central transport hub, and the principle is that each of those neighbourhoods have all of their facilities and amenities within a walkable distance. So this is how we are sort of setting up the Garden City, that there is that transport hub in the centre, and then even though it's over 100 years old, those principles do still hold strong today. So if we move to the next slide, I'll give an example. So by 2035, within the Garden City, you can see all of these walkable neighbourhoods, and each of them have their own amenities, whether that is a primary school, a community centre, retail, hospitality, commercial space. They all have their own amenities which are within a walkable distance. And this is what makes us a garden city rather than just a vast, huge housing development, because we're bringing all of those amenities and facilities into the garden city as well. Next slide, please. So how does this impact on skills and jobs? Well, there are 10 principles of a garden city, and the 6th one is to have a strong local job offer. We, as a development corporation, have adopted a strategy of inclusive growth, and simply put, we want local residents to benefit from the economic growth of the garden city. So we are doing this through training, education, reskilling and upskilling. And when we talk about local, we are talking about Dartford and Gravesham Borough residents. So it really is a very localised plan that we have for our skills and job offer. All of those things fit within social value and the levelling up agenda, working towards reducing unemployment, increasing incomes, skills attainment, and reducing deprivation and poverty. Next slide, please. So we've been going out with the messages that there are lots of different built environment. Oh, sorry, can you go back one slide? Oh, sorry, Amy, could you go back? Keep going back. So yeah, we have been going out with messages both through employability and education outreach programs around the different career pathways that are available within the built environment to increase awareness and also to inspire young people into the built environment careers. So we've run programs so far with Construction Youth Trust. They've been going out and doing some education outreach programs for us, careers fairs, as well as their Building Future Skills program, which is designed to give young people in sixth form the opportunity to put a project together and work in a project management type of way to deliver parts of the garden city. I'm so sorry, my slides have gone wrong. I'm just going to keep talking. And then with our employability programs, we've been working with training providers and the Prince's Trust, for example, and we have had success in getting younger people into jobs following those employability programs. So the next steps for us really is to align a North Kent skills action plan with that of the LEP, and also with the local skills improvement plan and a skills report pulled together for the Greater North Kent area as well. We're investigating a construction skills academy as a joint venture between developers and some of the local training providers to see whether we can deliver training that fills any skills gaps that are in the local area. We're going to be working with the supply chain and SMEs as well later in the year. I'll be expanding the employment and education outreach programs that I'm running and updating our website as well so that there is a greater focus on skills and employment. And finally, we'll be launching our social value strategy and campaign this summer, which will aim to grow the inclusive growth strategy and activities. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lara, and Apologies for the slides running away with you. It felt like we were getting an early insight into what you'd be talking about. But yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for sharing your contact details as well. Please do keep popping your questions in the Q&A. Thanks for those that have been doing so already. As I say, we are going to have some time set aside at the end to come back to those. So you know, if there's anything in relation to the generic skills piece, what Louise talked about in terms of that skills action plan, or specifics from each of our speakers, yeah, pop them in, and we'll have some time at the end. Thanks very much, Laura. I'm delighted to introduce our next project now, and from the CITB, it's Celine McGowan. Over to you, Celine.
Thank you. Well, I hope I have some success. I hope you can see my screen. Zoom is not something I'm familiar with. If somebody could just acknowledge that you can see that screen, that would be great. Fantastic. Well, good morning, everybody. I am the Customer Engagement Manager for CITB. I cover all of the South East LEP region and also New Anglia. I just want to talk to you today about the business plan CITB launched last year for the next 12 months. And I think it will give you a flavour of the sort of stuff and how it links in with what we're doing locally with the CELEP region. CITB will be investing 233 million to support British construction industry, and we're looking to put in plans that will address the additional requirement for about 50,000 workers every year. This is national, not necessarily local, we're looking at here. We also want to look at how we can secure the construction talent pipeline. Previous speakers have expressed the shortages that there will be in construction, and looking at how we can inspire people from outside the industry to choose construction and upskill into retaining existing talent. We've recognised there are three key challenges that we need to focus on, and that is responding to the skills demands, developing training provision, and addressing future skills. So our plan to address these challenges recognise that CITB has a central role in putting in place a skills infrastructure that meets employers' increasing needs. And it also recognises CITB is one part of the system, and we must work collaboratively with industry partners to achieve common goals, such as encouraging construction training and helping talented people from diverse backgrounds to join the industry, develop their skills and progress sustainable careers into the sector. So in responding to the skills demands, we know that each year an estimated 50,000 new recruits are needed in barriers to attracting the talent. New research indicates that only 30% of potential new recruits actually think of construction as is right for them. Apprenticeships is a long-established route for the construction industry for many to enter, and apprenticeships, is no surprise, will be a focus for us over the next few years to increase the uptake of construction apprenticeships. We also recognise that to attract candidates, a talent pool, we need to work with industry to create work experience placements, tasters, and develop pathways into apprenticeships through trainees. And one of the other ways of retaining is to look at how we look at fairness, inclusion, respect, and mental well-being, which is a very important part of the construction, because we know that that is an area that is a big concern for us. We are putting 60.3 million in direct grants for CITB eligible employers to support them to take on apprentices. So in tackling training provision, regardless of whether you're an employer, training provider or college, we all share one goal, and that is reducing construction's skills gaps. However, when it comes to training's role in meeting that challenge, we need to better understand that stakeholders have different drivers. So the wants of government, colleges, private training providers and employers are different and not necessarily misaligned with the needs of industry, but different. We have to understand that better, and if we're to get the best out of our training infrastructure. So what we mean by that is, if we look at UK government, it has a broader social values outcome for skills, which is why they always want English and maths into the qualifications. Meanwhile, if you talk to an employer, their priority is to get the workers through trained and through the door as quickly as possible. Colleges will also have a massive contribution to make to the construction sector. However, employers sometimes complain that students are not work ready when they enter the industry. Funding incentivises inclusions in education, regardless of sector or course that they're delivering. In addition, a current common problem across all aspects of training and has been mentioned by previous speakers is finding competent trainers and assessors. So it's time that we made the effort to align the capability and capacity across the UK for training provision with individuals and society needs. And with that in mind, the most pressing question is how we help construction employers with their urgent skills needs. I think I've missed a slide there. Oh. Okay, I did miss a slide. Just bear with me, see if I can go back. Okay, one of the things that many people may not be aware of is that CITB does do a lot of research. So we're investing 2.1 million looking at new technologies and from career sustainability and innovation, and what could we put in place for the future. We work with industry to look at new competency frameworks, and we will be focusing on working with construction leaders councils and other sectors on building on the research that we did on building to net zero, an action plan on what we need to do to reduce carbon footprint through construction for the future. Industry does want to develop non-technical skills for construction managers and leaders for tomorrow. And so what we're seeing is an increasing demand for behavioural skills, digital skills, and net zero ways of working. Okay. So how are we going to do that? I'm not going to go through all this slide because I am conscious of time, but within those three criteria areas, what we've highlighted there is the how we will address those. So we will be looking at our own Go Construct, which is the go-to site around careers to give people information about those careers opportunities. CITB works with FE and other training providers to deliver skill challenges for construction, and others have mentioned the importance of having an increasing STEM ambassadors to inspire people to come into the industry. And importantly, how do you make these jobs people aware of what the opportunities are within constructions? Then we can do that through things like offering tasters, and we will work with the sector to create those opportunities. We at CITB, for CITB registered employers, do offer grants. There's about 60.3 million we mentioned will go directly for taking on apprentices, but we are working on improving our internal systems to make it actually easier for employers to understand where they can access those opportunities. We also have, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar, we have our own national construction colleges. We were going to release them back to industry a few years ago, but we've now decided to retain them. So for us in the Select region, we've still got Erith, and we'll be looking for, we're talking about what we'll be doing to help develop skills there in Erith through the Select. We also have our site at Bircham Newton in Norfolk and in Shinning. Okay, so this is just a very useful slide that just shows you how we're going to focus on the entry point of people coming into construction, and giving you the life cycle of how they can be employed. We want, not only do we want to attract new talent, but we also want to retain them. And when we're talking about people coming into the industry, we want to inspire them to see that there is a lifelong career that they can have, but it's important that when they enter the industry, that to help them with those aspirations is that we continue to give them the skills that they need to improve. And ultimately what we want to do is actually retain people in the industry for the future. Okay, so the most essential element of training is understanding the demand, and there are two issues to consider when we're looking at training and skills, the long and the short term. In the short term, construction employers want skilled workers to get the job done, and in the long term, employers say they need skills for, sorry, I've got a lively keyboard here, so they want skills for net zero, digitalisation and modern methods of construction. The problem is they're not actually asking for them. So both these issues are needed, but the demand for training is short term, and the latter needs, the demand is minuscule. So it's vital we need to get that balance between the short and the long term. The construction industry is mainly made up of small to medium-sized businesses, and that's a concern because they are not always in the best place, like the bigger organisations, to be able to plan for the future. So our role as CITB is looking at how we can turbocharge those training for all of the industry. So what are we doing in the region? I can only touch on some of the things that we've done. We've got National Skills Academy for construction. We have two live National Skills Academies, one in Kent and one in Essex, with Graham Construction on the M2 and the M25 at junction 28. We've also got a further application for another one in Essex, which is just in the pipeline. But we've also spoken to local and county councils around them building in the framework for a National Skills Academy to have an employment and skills plan with their section 106 across the whole of the CELEP region. So those are still in the pipeline, and what we're hoping is that that will certainly come to fruition in the future. We have, as part of our research that we did for building to net zero, developed a modelling tool, and that will be something that I've put the CELEP forward for, which will help to predict future skills over the next 5 to 10 years, looking at our local market intelligence, and hopefully that's been piloted at the moment, and when that's ready, we're hoping that we might be able to use that in the CELEP region next year, and that can help us work with training providers to plan what training is needed and where it needs to be. CITB launched with others the Talent View, which is the recruitment portal for people first entry into construction, and that is working really well in the CELEP region. We've got commitment from the large projects to use that as a tool for advertising their entry point vacancies. And I have worked in Kent and Sussex, East Sussex, but just to give you an idea of some of the work that our colleagues are doing in Essex, for example, we're doing an LMI session for the Built Environment Careers Coordinators for IAG to talk about, giving them the tools so that they can talk knowledgeably about careers. We've also done that with some of the Kent enterprise people last year. We're presenting at Essex Opportunity Live, which is a webcast which is happening this month to talk about careers in construction. And recently I did a presentation for the Essex County Council Retrofit Conference, talking about retrofit and all things net zero. I thought it'd be useful just to give you kind of a breakdown of one of the projects, and this is one of many that we're working on. Basildon Construction Skills Partnership, as part of Basildon's section 106 for public sector buildings, they require an employment skills plan, and they're using the framework from CITB's National Skills Academy, and they require the winning contractor to complete this plan. I got contacted by the contractor and asked for help to support them putting in an engagement plan. And as a result of that, we now have work experience placements with the local schooling plan. They're taking on apprentices within the project. They are doing taster days for year 11 and 12 at local schools. They're working with a primary school over looking at environmental project and getting them to construct little bug hotels, which is going to be quite exciting, and a lot of the schools are engaged in doing that. But also working with that employer, although they were CITB registered, they hadn't fully understood all of the grant support that was available to them. And the local South Essex advisor has been able to sit down and look at what they're doing training. And they've been amazed at thousands of pounds that they were entitled to, that they could claim to support them with doing training. And we've also linked them to working with local stakeholders. We mentioned about how we're looking at developing training provision, and this is something that we're looking at locally. And recently, our National Construction College at Erith, we did have a meeting actually only on Monday with Lara Ebbsfleet, Gravesham and Kent County Council, just to look at what is happening across that North Kent corridor and indeed the South Essex, because the location of Erith is ideal to support some of those major projects. The goal there is to look at how we can support and look at maybe some niche training that CITB may be best placed to do. We're not competing with other training provision, but we want to complement it. So there are talks about how we can actually develop provision to support those projects. And to give you another idea of sort of what we're doing with Galliford Try in Westbeach, I think it's the A47 they're building next year. And they've already spoken to us, said, look, can CITB help us? We know there's going to be an issue with the shortage of ground workers. So we're looking to develop a pilot to recruit some traineeships around ground workers. But beyond that, what we're looking at is the wider projects that are happening, including across into Suffolk for Sizewell. We know that ground workers will be greatly needed across the whole of the Selap region. So if this pilot works, it's a model that we're hoping to put in place that we can work with the key projects to make sure that we have a pipeline of ground workers that will fulfill those project needs over the next few years. We've also developed leadership management standards, which are predominantly for small to medium-sized businesses, and that's targeting the new leaders or senior staff that have taken on new roles within construction. We'll be running a pilot in Kent for some SMEs. That, interestingly, was oversubscribed. Only put it out, and within half an hour, I'd filled it with 20 spaces. And then finally, one of the other things that we're doing is we do work very closely with our FE providers. We see them as vital to helping us with our mission. And we are setting up a working group to share best practice, develop CPD and share LMI intelligence, and also a referral scheme. So where you've got, where a college has information they want to support from a CITB registered employer around grants, and vice versa, where CITB are contacted by an employer, we do a referral to the local college for them to support. I'm sure there'll be loads of questions. There are loads that CITB is doing within the region, and I'm time limited, and I can see Jeremy's appeared, so I'm guessing my time is up, but I'm happy to answer any questions later on today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Celine. CITB clearly has a huge role to play in supporting these projects from an infrastructure and skills perspective, and I think you know, it's really refreshing to see such a proactive strategic approach being taken. There's a few comments and questions there, Celine. We'll let you have a look at those, and we'll probably pick a few of them up at the end, if that's okay. And a reminder for everyone, yeah, keep posing those comments and questions of all of our speakers. Thanks again, Celine. It is a spotlight on the next project now, and I'm delighted that Jessica Power from Lower Thames Crossing has joined us to talk all about that project, give us an update, and no doubt talk about the skills agenda too. So over to you, Jess.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry, just had to find the unmute button there. Hopefully you can all see my screen. So I am Jess Power, and I am the Skills Education and Employment Manager for Lower Thames Crossing. I manage and coordinate a team to ensure that we and our contractors meet the overall ambitions of the project. And our overall goal is to provide sustainable benefits for local people through new businesses, employment, skills and careers engagement. So to give a bit of a recap and to put into some context on who we are and why we are here, the Dartford Crossing, many of you will know, the Dartford Crossing is one of the most important roads, which is a vital link between Kent and Essex. It has stood there for 65 years and it is the only crossing between Kent and Essex, but it is now significantly over capacity. You'll see some stats there that it can take up to 3 to 5 hours for the roads to clear following a closure, and it has one of the highest incident rates on a strategic road network. So those closures do unfortunately happen often. So that is where Lower Thames Crossing comes in. And this is National Highways proposal and the most ambitious road project in the last 35 years. It will be made up of a 14.3 mile road and a 2.6 mile long twin board tunnel. It will provide a vital link for regional and national connectivity by doubling capacity in the southeast and will significantly reduce congestion at the Dartford Crossing. And it's hoping to improve resilience at the existing Thames crossings as well. Story so far. We've been working on the project since 2016. Since then, we've done lots of investigating work and understanding what is the best route, looking at the impact of local areas, and also taking part in numerous consultations. Back in 2017, the Department for Transport chose the preferred route. And as I said, a number of consultations have taken place since. There is a current local refinement consultation with numerous events happening across the region. We have been heavily involved in engaging with communities and in consulting on project information, and we are still in the planning application phase. We are looking to resubmit our planning application later this year, and should we get planning consent, we will then start 6 years worth of construction before the targeted road opening of 2029 to 2030. So that gives us a little bit of a recap of where we are so far. We do have an ambition to build the UK's greenest road. Earlier this year, National Highways designated the Lower Thames Crossing as a Pathfinder project to explore carbon neutral construction and to build the UK's greenest road and to set the standard for the future of road building. We want to put carbon at the heart of everything we do and want to continue exploring new and improved building methods and ensuring our current and our future workforce and the supply chain have the appropriate skills, knowledge and understanding to keep the industry moving forward. We are in the process of developing a low carbon strategy, which will look at how we can build Lower Thames Crossing with the lowest carbon emissions, and it will take into account materials, the market and management, with one key component of this being the skills that are needed. The transition to the green economy does require a workforce with the right knowledge, skills and attitudes and values to create a more sustainable society. So far, we have cut predicted construction emissions by over a third through design, and we will use zero carbon energy sources such as to power the TBMs. We're going to reuse a considerable amount of waste, such as the spoil for the landscaping, and we are looking to make use of existing low carbon materials. We are also the first UK infrastructure project to use the procurement process to incentivise and continue the carbon reduction. But we do still have lots of work to do. We do need help to continue to learn and expand on what already exists. And we plan to work with industry and education to continue this process. And it is important that we make a collective effort to meet these targets, to influence the future of the industry and also change the culture and behaviours of those working within the industry. We're looking to work to support local and government targets, as well as National Highways ambitions to reach net zero. So overall, looking at the skills education and employment strategy, we have 4 main objectives. We're looking to create a lasting skills legacy, which will address the skills gap and change training standards for building a low carbon infrastructure. Looking to bring new jobs and training to the local area through new inclusive jobs and training placements. Inspire future careers by assembling the next generation of talent through effective engagement with local students and their educators, and to support business growth by providing local businesses and SMEs with the tools to win new work and maximise economic benefits during and after construction. So to break these down even further, we have 6 main ambitions. Over the lifetime of the project, we will see 22,000 jobs, and we aim to ensure a large percentage of this workforce is made up of people local and close to the project. So they are in the Essex and Kent regions and in the boroughs that we impact the most. We want to leave behind a lasting skills legacy, ensuring that the region have the correct skills needed to access higher skilled and therefore higher paid jobs, aiding in local economic recovery and growth. And we want to ensure that young people are inspired into careers through meaningful engagement, alongside supporting their educators with the tutor shortage and up-to-date labour market information. And to build a resilient workforce and local businesses to ensure that we leave behind a region better equipped to win work on future contracts and not just within Lower Thames Crossing. So a year on from our last presentation, a skills education employment team was mobilised, and we were mobilised at the end of 2021. We now have an advisor in the north and south of the river, and they're really embedding themselves into the community and looking to seek opportunities to support. We have joined and supported numerous working groups and partnerships, and the team attend many local authority skills groups, local IAG sessions, and have formed the Lower Thames Crossing Working Group. The C strategy has gone through several rounds of comments and feedback, both internal and external, and we are hoping to launch this publicly later this summer. We have taken into consideration lessons learned from other major projects and also the local need. We have worked with engaging with adult colleges and the DWP to address skills shortages and unemployment figures. And we are collaborating with the likes of the Careers and Enterprise Company and STEM hubs and numerous other charities of training provision have supported delivery so far. And as you can see there, we have also taken a part in national events such as National Apprenticeship Week. We released a couple of animations delivered by our apprentices on the project, and we also introduced you to our local National Highways apprentices. We also supported National Careers Week with several careers blogs exploring different roles and careers within the construction and engineering industry. For all of this delivery, such as careers events, workshops, interview skills, we have engaged with over 1,500 young people. We now have over 20 STEM ambassadors within the project, all in different roles, who are helping this delivery. And most recently, we have become a cornerstone employer for both Thurrock and Southend and Kent and Medway careers hubs. So our next steps are to continue to work to deliver an impactful and inclusive work experience programme. We're looking to target our delivery to our cluster schools and those most impacted by construction and those in areas of socio-economic deprivation. We are targeting numerous events for priority groups, and we do have an event planned later this month for International Women in Engineering Day. And we are looking to further support schools to deliver our Minecraft games. We are going to continue to support strategic groups such as Careers and Enterprise Company and raising the standards for school engagement. We've recently met with the Department for Education and discussed T-levels and how we can look to support those in a local level. And we are looking locally to see how we can fill the need for placements across various sectors and qualifications within the project. Then on business engagement a year on. So since last year, we've continued to grow our SME directory. This now has over 600 businesses signed up, and this directory will be passed to the main works contracts to assist them in building their supply chain, and is a great way to hear up-to-date information about the project and how your business can get involved. You are still able to register on our website. Recently, we have run a market sounding questionnaire, which saw a number of businesses across the region share further details on how we're able to plan and support them. 77% of those who responded were SMEs, and the data will be used to influence future actions and work streams. There will be further opportunities for businesses to get involved in this way. We continue to work with Supply Chain Sustainability School, and there are a number of workshops planned in the coming months around digital leadership, modern slavery, and fairness and inclusion. And then finally, back in February, Lower Thames Crossing, alongside the Thames Estuary Growth Board, held a Road to Net Zero event. This event saw 150 attendees come together from businesses to education and share challenges around the carbon agenda. We had 5 breakout rooms looking into materials, supply chain, and green skills. And a roundup video for the event is still available on our YouTube page. And that's all from myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jess. Again, kind of what an insightful presentation, not just into the project itself in its entirety, but great to see that progress over the last year from a skills and education perspective. And yeah, as you said, any questions, please feel free to pose them in the chat, and we'll ensure Jess has some time at the end to come back to them. But yeah, thank you, really insightful, and great to hear that proactive approach once more. Common theme, I think, here across these projects. Thank you. Okay, I'm delighted to welcome and hand over next to Michael Beard. Michael joins us from the UK Health Security Agency, formerly known as Public Health England. We're delighted to have you here, Michael, to give us an update on that project, and particularly, I think, in relation to Harlow and this geographical area. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks very much, and thanks for inviting me. I'm 100% confident I won't have any problems with my slides because I don't have any. So I just want to give you a short verbal update of where we are, but I think more importantly is where we're heading and how. So the decision was taken that we were going to replace our ageing facilities that we have in Wiltshire and also North London, and pull them together, co-locate them on a new campus. And as a result of that, we bought the former GSK site in Harlow. I think it's just under 40 acres with a really incredible building. You can imagine GSK didn't leave anything short, so the building was really what we were looking for, and it was one of the reasons for us choosing that as the site for the location, because it could have been anywhere in the country. The other reason as well was the corridor, the innovation corridor, and the number of life sciences organisations that are on the doorstep, and it was. Yeah, that for a number of reasons, not just about the research opportunities and the joint opportunities, but also recruitment and development as well at the same time. And we were heading along really nicely, and then all of a sudden this thing called COVID hit us. And you can imagine as a public health agency, which and looking after the security of public health, it kind of dominated everything. And but it also dominated the thinking about the way forward for the organisation, which, as Jeremy just mentioned, was at that time was Public Health England, which, despite some of the headlines you might have seen, we were never set up to really deal with something of the scale of COVID. And during the outbreak, the decision was taken that we were going to be replaced, and a much bigger organisation created, which is the UK Health Security Agency, and that includes what was Test and Trace, and also the Joint Biosecurity Centre as well. But the plans for Harlow continued, but all of a sudden we weren't the only show in town. So this was a much bigger organisation with a lot more estate, a lot more laboratories. So we've kind of had to take a pause and look at that again, refresh our thinking, refresh our business thinking and business planning. That is this going to be right for the organisation, which obviously took us some time. And we went through that, and the decision was, yep, Harlow is still the best option. That's what we're going to do. So we carried on with that, and we've got planning permission. We construction partners have been on site, and we're really gathering pace. But then the living with COVID conversations started about how we're going to pay for COVID, I think is the shorthand for it. And what we had a business case which was looking at the next 3 years, and we had the funding for that. And like every organisation across the health family, there was a look at that. So, well, hang on a minute, do we need to be spending this money? And in our case, the decision was taken that certainly the money that was earmarked for the next 3 years, we were going to get some money for the next 12 months, and it was reduced as well. So that's where we are. So at this moment in time, our the construction work is slowing down, and will slow down for quite some time. Whilst we do a number of things, we have to first of all work out, okay, within this new organisation, is what's the strategy for research and science, and also the estates, which is being evolved by the UK HSA, and we expect that to be defined pretty soon. And then that will make it clear what the role is of Harlow within that. So we've slowed things down on site for certainly for now, but with a view to ramping it up again towards the end of this year, and then being back up to full pace again at the beginning of next year. The funding we've had has allowed us, though, to continue with our essential construction work, the essential design work as well, and understanding what it is that the organisation wants to do there. And the other thing that we've been able to do, which is particularly relevant, I think, for the conversations we're having, is about, okay, what's the skills, what's that workforce going to look like? What skills will we need there? Because there's no doubt at all with what's happened with COVID, with the new organisation, and some of the different sort of priorities for that, the skill set will need to change within the organisation. Not dramatically, because it will still be public health science, but there'll be considerable additions to that. There'll also be the new technology that we're installing there as well, and we will have some of the latest. And this isn't a sales pitch, but it'll have some of the latest, most up-to-date, state-of-the-art technology that there is to deal with this, and it's been designed particularly with future pandemics in mind, which at the start of the journey wasn't the case at all. So yeah, we will need different skills. So there's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to work out that, and then, okay, what are the partnerships we need to do? Who do we need to work with? How do we recruit? Because the other thing that should be considered is this is a 60-year business plan. So yes, we'll be taking some of our staff, and that's the other thing we have to work out: who's going to come with us and who's not. So what are the gaps going to be when we start there? Because there is no option at all of standing there and looking at empty labs. The work has to continue. And the sites, so the other two sites that I mentioned before, they'll continue running whilst we build and we start work at Harlow to make sure it's as seamless as possible. So we've had conversations with universities. We've signed memorandums of understanding with 3 of the local universities. We've also signed a statement of intent with Harlow College as well, to start that ball rolling. But it's got to be adaptable, because, as I say, we've had to step back a little bit, and some of the needs and requirements will be changing around that. So that's the work that we can carry on with, and thank goodness for that, because it'll be so important, and it won't delay things any more than might happen now. At the same time, we need to understand who's going, and longer term, when people leave, where do we do our recruitment from? And the obvious thing about that is, well, within the local community. That's where we should start. So the partnerships that we've started to build there, we need to strengthen those and really develop those. And the other important thing to remember is, yes, it's all centered around public health science, but not everybody is a scientist that works for UK HSA. There's a large proportion of support staff, as you can imagine. There's going to be something in the region of over 2,000 people based at Harlow, working with centres across the country, with other partners, both commercial and academic as well. So if you think of my world in communications, HR, legal, finance, all of these sort of support services will need to do some recruitment with as well. So again, who are the people that we need to be speaking to? At the same time, we were heading along nicely from a construction point of view as well. And we set up with Harlow College a construction skills centre based actually on the site, where our 3 main construction partners were part of that. And they're significant companies who've got considerable experience on this. So they were to help us with that, to set it up and bring to bear the experiences that they'd had with previous projects. That unfortunately has had to be put on hold because of COVID and initially the restrictions on that, but also the slowing down with the work. But the clear plan that we've got, and that we're working with Harlow College again, is that as soon as possible, that will be started up again, and then we'll be up to sort of full scale with that. And as to give you an idea, we think that at the height of the construction, there could be as many as 2,000 people working on the site there. And that could be happening for the next 6, 7, 8, 9, possibly even 10 years or even longer. Because to give you an idea of some of the construction that we do, there'll be a containment facility there, which by itself just takes 2 years to build and probably could take as much as 2 years to commission. It's that complex. And so that gives you an idea of the complexity that we face. The next steps for us are to secure an update or to refresh our business case, to submit that and then get approval, not just for next year's funding, but for funding beyond that, because then that gives us the absolute certainty of full steam ahead and helps with the partnerships that we build as well. I could talk a lot more, but I think as a quick snapshot of where we've been, where we are now, where we hope to head, hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into it.
Michael, thank you very much, and what a journey you've been on with that project.
Yeah, a bit of a roller coaster.
Yeah, it sounds like it, and you summed up yourself, I think, when talking about complexity, that there's another common feature probably of everything we're talking about, as well as life in the last few years. But that the bigger picture is so important, isn't it? And I think at a time when the bigger picture, feels like it's changed a lot and will continue to change a lot, that look to the future in terms of future skills needs is really what this is all about in my mind.
Absolutely, and reacting to that.
Thank you very much indeed
for
coming and providing us with the update. I think almost a question for me, which I'll leave you to consider maybe for at the end, and others as well, is around that piece about the local community. You've all talked about wanting to impact positively on the local community, wanting the workforce to come from the local community. I guess it's a question for us all. Can't help but think, have we actually looked to see if there are enough local people for these jobs? That we're talking about a considerable collective workforce here, aren't we? And one for us to come back to a bit later on.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Michael. Okay, next up in terms of these projects is just a small minnow, really, in the grand scheme of things, and that's Bradwell B. For those of you that don't know, Bradwell B is the proposed new nuclear power station at Bradwell, surprisingly, in Essex. It's being progressed by joint partners CGN and EDF. I think the update on Bradwell B is going to be provided by our CELEP team, our CELEP Secretariat. So over to you. I think that probably is you, Sharon.
That is me. Thank you, Jeremy. Hopefully you can see my screen. You can hear me. Is it coming? It's be a bit slow this morning, so apologies.
Yeah, here it is, Sharon. Here it is.
How's that? Are we there?
All good. Go
Great. Thank you. So yeah, as Jeremy said, I'm actually from the CELEP team, but today on behalf of the Bradwell B project team, just got a few slides to share with you that provide a brief update of the project overall. So a little bit of context. In April this year, the UK government released its energy security strategy, outlining the approach to energy supply with the aim to increase energy independence in the UK, while also delivering on net zero targets. An energy security bill has also been announced. And in terms of nuclear, the energy security strategy said the following: that it would increase civil nuclear to up to 24 gigawatts by 2050, which is 3 times more than today and representing up to 25% of our projected electricity demand. Also, that it would take one project to final investment decision during this Parliament, which would be Sizewell C, and then 2 further projects in the next Parliament, including small modular reactors. So this isn't a cap on ambition, but a challenge to the industry to come forward and compete for projects and aim to come online this decade. These ambitions could see our nuclear sector progressing up to 8 more reactors across the next series of projects. So this is an ambitious target for nuclear to ensure energy security and net zero. And the Bradwell B project can support this ambition as it has a well-developed design, a suitable site, and technology which is tried and tested, as well as an experienced developer. So work is continuing to move the project forward. Hinkley Point C also released its annual socio-economic impact report, which shows some of the huge benefits already being realised in the Southwest and across the UK. And some of the key statistics from that include 4.1 billion that's been spent to date with companies in the Southwest, 22,000 people in Britain currently working on the project, and 249 businesses from the east of England now working on Hinkley Point C, which amounts to over £1 billion worth of spend. So this report really shows the value of new nuclear in terms of jobs, investment and opportunity. So in February this year, the generic design assessment for the UK HPR 1000, which is the reactor technology proposed for Bradwell B, was successfully completed. The generic design assessment, or GDA, is the process that new nuclear reactor designs go through to obtain approval for use in the UK. The Office for Nuclear Regulation and the Environment Agency looks at safety, security and environmental protection. So the GDA focuses purely on the reactor design and doesn't consider any site-specific issues. A range of site-specific consents, a nuclear site licence and permits would also be required to build Bradwell B. But the completion of the GDA is confirmation that the technology is acceptable for use in the UK. And the Bradwell B project team will now be focused on how to implement that design at the Bradwell site. So this slide just shows where the project is now and then the various stages of design that will follow. And this year, the team will continue to concentrate on feasibility for the project. This involves considering options and evaluating them against a range of criteria. So the work is informed by the stage 1 consultation feedback as well. And one of the focuses in terms of feasibility is developing the programme and timing for the GI and load testing work, which received planning permission last year. So as I say, that's quite a brief update on behalf of the project team. They were unable to join us this morning, but if there are any questions specifically around this project, we'd be very happy to take them back and try to get a response following the webinar.
Thanks very much, Sharon, for stepping in and providing the update. And we know that representatives for media and Bradwell have been kind of really important players in looking at the major projects piece. And from looking at the impact of Hinkley Point C alone, where it gives us an insight into just the scale and scope and potential impact of this project in our region, and therefore, requirement to really look ahead from a skills perspective. Thanks, Sharon. And please continue to pose those questions, everyone. We're definitely going to have some time at the end to get stuck into those and pose them back to the panel. Okay, I'm delighted now to welcome Martin Whiteley from Thames Freeport, one of the 2 Freeports in the Celeb area, the other one being Freeport East, I believe, who's going to give us an update on that exciting project. Good to have you here, Martin. Over to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. I've not got any slides like the previous speakers. I was just going to say a few words of introduction to Thames Freeport. I'm the Chief Executive, and the Freeport is, for those that are unfamiliar with it, is essentially a partnership between 3 principal businesses: Ford Motor Company, DP World, who own London Gateway, and Forth Ports, who operate the Port of Tilbury. The outer boundary of the Freeport comprises of 3 local authority areas. First of all, Thurrock Council, and then the London boroughs of Barking and Dagenham and the London borough of Havering. It is arguably the biggest economic intervention in London and the southeast of the moment. The expectation is that it will create a minimum of 21,000 direct jobs and over 50,000 indirect jobs over the next 20 years. It is expected that in terms of the policy, that many of those jobs will be created within local communities so that they benefit from the prosperity that ports will create, but previously that prosperity has not been shared equally with local communities. It's also expected that it will attract over £4.5 billion worth of inward investment, and that it will be a leader in innovation and net zero. So it is a very large scale project. In terms of skills, if we're going to create 21,000 new jobs, then clearly the demand for skills to support that position is going to be considerable. And so I think that I would say that there are 3 points that are really important. The first is that we need to change the way in which the employers operate and behave in relation to skills, because at the moment they do not do, I think, by their own recognition, enough to help with the development of curriculum, the anticipation on understanding about what future skills needs are, or the quantification of that. So there's something really important about getting businesses to think differently about their future and how they operate and relate to skills provision. So that's the first thing. I think the second is that there's something that we need to do differently about the way that we engage with communities. And so we've heard lots of people talking about how they do that. And yet we, I think, have two or three big risks. The first is that we have lots of people doing lots of things in communities, all that's well intended, but it becomes very fragmented. And so, and that we continue to do that in a way which attracts people that we've always attracted, but we don't get to some of the harder to reach communities. So I think we've got a collective responsibility to think about how our engagement with communities and schools is going to be different, and how the stories that we're going to tell in communities will be different, so that people who previously haven't listened to them are more tuned in than they have been, and therefore are more inclined to come to the employment opportunities that we're creating. And I think the third area that we need to explore are the way in which providers operate in a strategic sense, and indeed how they respond to a better position that we create with business, as I described a moment or two ago. So I think there's kind of 3 fundamental themes that we need to explore. And we need to do that in general terms across the whole of the system. And we need to do it in relation to specific programs of activity, that whether that's the Freeport sponsoring them, or the Lower Thames Crossing, or Bradwell, or Ebbsfleet, we need to think about how we're going to join some of that up in a way that we've not thought about before. And I think that the real power that we can bring is when we start to think about the aggregation and the collaboration that will exist across our respective interests in order to achieve much more. Jeremy, that's all I was going to say at this stage. The Freeport's at quite an early stage in its development. We are a startup, but maybe when we get a little bit further along in our journey, into the late summer, early autumn, then we'll be able to come back and talk a little bit more about how we're developing some of the thinking that we have, and how that might dovetail with the other organisations that have been speaking today. But thanks very much in the meantime.
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin, for joining us and giving us that update. And I think, you know, we'd be delighted to have you back to provide a bit more detail on where you are on that journey at a later stage, either at a future webinar or certainly from a skills working group perspective. Thank you. And again, please feel free, anyone in the audience, to pose any questions of Martin and that project in particular. Martin, you hit the nail on the head for me with, you know, some of your comments. You know, that one about needing to change the way employers approach skills, I think is a really, really relevant point. You know, some of the most future thinking employers obviously are able to think about the next 3 years, 5 years, and some further ahead. But there are a lot of employers out there, and it's not a criticism, that can't look beyond the here and now. And I think, you know, there's a need and an opportunity there, isn't there, in supporting employers to be able to look further ahead as part of that strategic piece. I agree, that's really important. I think your point about employers informing the curriculum is a really good one too. And I think there's been a lot of drive from the government through to providers, where there's a much greater and different expectation for us as colleges and education providers to be evidencing that what we're doing is meeting needs. And we've got the new education, Post-16 Education Skills Act, of course, where it's now a requirement for us to be reflecting local skills. But actually, if I also look through an Ofsted lens, Ofsted are very focused when coming in and looking at colleges in particular, FE in particular, at whether we are meeting employer needs as well. So I think the drivers, carrots and sticks, as it were, are there from the provider's perspective, but clearly there's a need to kind of, I think, do that work with employers so that that's coming together. So yeah, a really great point. And then I think in your summing up in terms of that collective responsibility, that's why we're all here. And I think that's where I can certainly see the value in this group continuing to work closely together. So thank you. Okay, great. Well, you know, it's been what an inspiring, actually, as well as highly informative and insightful number of presentations. And we have got time to go through the questions that have been posed and any other questions that people might want to pose, of course. I notice there's a handful in the chat, which I'll come on to, but I would just suggest if anyone else has any other comments or questions that they'd like to throw in there if they haven't done already, please feel free to do so. So I think I'm going to ask our presenters to come back, you know, turn your cameras back on and join us back on the screen. There you go. And I'm, no pressure, Jeremy, going to try and artfully pan some questions amongst you, or span some questions amongst you, using the number of upvotes, because that's the way we do things, isn't it, in this virtual Q&A world. So if you haven't asked a question, have a little look in those that have been posed already, and check that you're not asking one that's already been asked, because that will really confuse me. And equally, if there's one that you think, oh, God, that's exactly the right point to make, give it a little thumbs up, and then it means I'll make sure I pick it out. So having looked at those questions, there are some, you know, there's some useful comments in there. Thanks very much, Aj Sharman from STEM, commenting on you know, the STEM Ambassador Programme and widening access there. If you've got a specific question, Aj, I'll let you come in a second. I think there might be one a bit later on. Thank you, Debbie Lloyd from the National Careers Service, for your comments. Debbie's left her contact details there, I think, for people. And I think, again, Debbie's got a question in a second. So here we go, Aj. You had a question for Celine. Would you like to ask it directly? Oh, you can't. I need to pose it to Celine. That's why you're here, Jeremy. So Celine, a question from Madge. Very useful summary on CITB. Should or could we create with CELEP a kind of focused construction roadshow across secondary schools, UTCs and colleges to drive an understanding of apprenticeship career opportunities across the place? Yeah, what are your thoughts, Celine?
That's an interesting question. I remember several years ago when I worked in FE, there was I can't remember who organised it. They did something at the Kent County Showground, which was absolutely brilliant. And it was a central point where we invited schools and colleges to come to experience. We did like tasters. There were activities so that people that come along could learn about the careers, but also get a feel for what they were. It was very expensive, I think. So it only ran once. So it's worth the conversation, because actually I think something like that, where construction, because it's such a vital part of what we need within the CELEP region, is something that we could look at. But the question always is how is it funded? But yeah, I think it's worth a conversation, and there is a model out there that's been done previously, which I thought was brilliant. But I do know that it took a lot of logistics and money, which is always a challenge. I don't have an answer, but it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I agree, and you're quite right. Those sorts of things have existed on a kind of a sub-regional county level before, and clearly with a lot of these things, there's questions of funding. But I think that stronger together means, I'm sure there are opportunities for us to overcome those. And I can see Louise scribbling away there, so it's certainly something we can come back to. Great question, Aj, and Celine, thanks for your dog making an appearance.
Somebody's come to the door, got paint decorators. Chaos has arrived as I go on live.
Great, yeah. Thank you, Celine. Another question there from Aj, in terms of the free ports, and kind of what's happening there. So that would be for you, Mike. I've heard the term green free ports, and I would welcome understanding of future green skills to this agenda too. Michael, are you able to respond to that?
Don't think that's one for me.
I think Martin's had to leave, unfortunately, Jeremy. So we might have to pose that to him in writing.
Apologies, Michael. I almost put you on the spot there. Yeah, it's a good question, Aj. I had that question about the kind of the green skills element of that as well. So yeah, we'll come back to that. Some more really useful comments there. Thank you. Aj, you're keeping everyone on their toes today. Thanks for your questions. It's insightful as always. And a question for Jess there about diversity and inclusion, and the extent to which Lower Thames Crossing are kind of pushing to ensure that, and with regard to the wider talent pool. Jess, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, of course. So the strategy that will be sort of launched later this summer will go into a lot more detail about sort of our plans for an inclusive recruitment program and how we've worked with local stakeholders to identify key areas of priority. So dependent on the local host authorities and what they're sort of aiming and prioritising, we are sort of hoping to align with that as well. So whether it be care leavers or socioeconomic deprivation, we are sort of trying to sort of focus our efforts in key host boroughs and what we're doing to deliver. And I did sort of allude to a few targeted events, so especially sort of women and girls into construction, making the most of some of those national events such as International Women Engineering Day, and then focusing on some key skills and the sort of diversity of roles within construction engineering as well. So yeah, it is outlined probably in more detail once the strategy is released.
Yeah, Louise, does some of that, do some of those kind of approaches feature in the action plan as it currently stands, thinking about certain groups and participation, etc.?
It does, yeah, but I think we probably need to integrate it further. So it would be useful to, to draw on what the projects are doing individually to make sure we're really reflecting that properly. So yeah, we can make sure we get that in there.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thanks, Louise, and thanks, Jess, for your response. Really good examples. Michael, I'll get there in the end. Here's your question, and it is asked of Aj. Have you created a future-facing video of what's being proposed at Harlow so that local schools and community can get a wider handle on those opportunities and skills needs? Over to you.
We did, but it's changed.
Of course,
yeah, we spend a lot of time, because you can imagine, just for our own staff and the people that are going to be moving, we created a vision. And we did all sorts of things. It was a narrative video, the whole lot. We're actually now thinking again, and certainly by the end of the year, we will definitely have the material in place. And it's entirely in our interest to share that as widely as we possibly can. So yes, the answer is, I guess, the short answer is not at the moment, but very soon, yes.
Great, thank you. And one can't help but think, in this world of media in which we live, and digital media in which we live, whether raising that part of that raising awareness kind of aspect across all of these projects, there's an opportunity to create some, I don't know, potentially create some video. I just know that when you're looking to target certain audiences, and particularly the younger ones, there's nothing like a bit of TikTok. Thank you very much, Michael, for your response there. Moving on down, Wendy, thank you very much for your comment and question, which I shall read out. And if anybody wants to answer, or Louise or Sharon, if you want to step in, please feel free to do so. Wendy, your question is, I represent a smaller district and we have a lack of post-16-18 education and skills opportunities. With poor transport links to travel. That's Malden, the Malden district. Are there plans to support our educational needs? And if not, why not? Yeah, really interesting point. I wasn't aware that there was a gap in terms of post-16 education and skills opportunities there. I don't know if anyone else knows that area or is working currently in that area at all? No, Louise?
I know that, I would kind of echo what Wendy has said there, that I know there is a lack of 16 to 18, and often students have to travel to neighbouring Chelmsford, Colchester and other areas. And I know the rural nature of Malden kind of exacerbates that. I am aware that Essex County councillors are visiting the district, I think this week actually, to further consider some of those barriers. But I think for sure we would want to look at how we can help with that, whether there are kind of satellite provision happening, what are the ways around that? How do we make sure provision is available within the district? So I think we would welcome a further conversation about that to find practical solutions, and not just 16 to 18, but probably adults more generally, making sure that they have that kind of provision in their locality. So if there's work we can do with projects as well to help achieve that, we would welcome that conversation.
Thanks, Louise. Really good point, really good response, and a really great point, Wendy. I think it's probably just a timely reminder, isn't it, for us all, that wherever we go from here in terms of meeting those skills needs, that those training and education opportunities, whether that's around new entrants, whether that's upskilling, reskilling, retraining, they have to be accessible. And accessibility means lots of different things, doesn't it? To particularly rural areas, but also people in work. I think my time in FE would tell me that one of the biggest barriers to upskilling and reskilling is not just those that reaching the hardest to reach, but actually reaching people in work, and that's about flexibility of delivery as well as some of those kind of other barriers to access. So all good things for us to be thinking about. Thank you. Was a really good question at the start, actually, in relation to CELEP and county deals. Are there any counties within CELEP looking at county deals? And if so, what does this mean for CELEP? So Louise or Sharon, are you happy to answer that?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, Jeremy. So following the white paper, government did actually confirm that kind of all LEPs in the country are in different positions, and those LEPs where there are no devolution deals in place, which applies to CELEP, that government will continue to support the LEPs as they're currently constituted. So that's currently the situation, but obviously a key part of our role becomes supporting any transition or any kind of discussions around devolution deals and what works locally in the future. But as it stands currently, government support the LEP as it currently stands.
Great, thank you very much,
And
Sharon.
we have that in writing, which is always nice.
Yeah, and really good to hear, given the valuable work that CELEP has done, and undoubtedly will continue to do, in my mind. And for me, today is evidence, if ever it was needed, that we need to continue to take this kind of regional approach, or Southeast LEP approach. Thank you for that. There are a couple more questions, and I think we'll look to wrap up. I think some useful comments again from Debbie in relation to National Careers Service, so I'll let people take those away and follow those up. And then Catherine, you had a question for Celine, I think asking about LMI and built environment careers advisors. Were college careers advisors invited, Celine, and or is this something maybe we could do more of or differently moving forward? Celine, you happy to answer that?
Yeah, I don't know. It's Essex County Council. Fiona Marriage has organised it. I'm just turning up, so I'm not quite sure who's going to be there. But actually, that could well also. More than happy to do those. It's not an issue for us. We're doing an FE provider meeting on the 7th of July, and I think from there there will be some activities. We'd be more than happy to look at what support measures can CITB be offering to colleges, and if that's something that you want, it's not an issue for us to deliver it. We've got a team of advisors more than happy to do stuff like that. It's a win-win for us.
Yeah, fabulous, Grace. Really good to hear. Thank you very much. Louise, Sharon, can anyone see anything else that we haven't responded to? Go on, Louise.
There's a question probably for all projects. So David Rayner has posed the question of all projects should be aiming to be sustainable and zero carbon as soon as possible. What are the various projects doing to be leaders in this field, and are they facing pushback on that? Do we have the necessary skills in our workforce to achieve this? And if not, what are we doing around that? So I guess it's not the easiest of questions, but it's probably relevant to all the projects, really.
Yeah, it's a great question. Who wanted to go first? Lara, go for it.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. Yes, we at EDC in the Garden City here, we have an environmental strategy and a carbon zero target also. We'll be launching those later this year. It also joins quite neatly with the social value strategy and campaign that we'll be launching, which gives our developers the opportunity to engage with our ambitions around environmental sustainability, as well as community and schools outreach, etc. One thing that I have done recently was work with local schools to talk about modern methods of construction, and particularly digital skills that are required, which again, as we all know, modern methods of construction do assist hugely with carbon footprints, in that, Berkeley Modular Factory is within our boundary here in Northfleet, and they are building modular housing in the factory there. So there's a number of ways that we are tackling that. But I must say that the younger generation are so much more switched on than we are in this arena. And I've been to a number of schools with Construction Youth Trust, with Class of Your Own as well, where they have eco-type projects that the young people work on, and some of the ideas that they come back to when they present back to ourselves are incredible. We've had eco classrooms with green roofs and bee-friendly flowers on the roof, solar energy, wind energy, reusing rainwater, for watering the landscape and things like that as well. So it's all very well as having strategies and things like that, but actually we just need to listen to the younger generation, because they are really have a great understanding of what's required and are, all really switched on to protecting the planet more than our generation, I would say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, kind of being the principal of a college with, close to the several kind of thousands, 14 to 19-year-olds, I would absolutely echo that. It's the single most important thing to that generation. And that's great, isn't it? We've got an opportunity to kind of use that maybe as a hook when it comes to attracting interest, because I think that's, going to be a really big challenge. Probably I would describe the attraction piece as one of the big adaptive challenges across all of these projects. We've talked a lot about what employers being able to set out what their skills needs are, and we've got that fabulous report that Louise talked about in the beginning, kind of with that timeline and looking at numbers. But a big part of this is not just reaching the ones that are difficult to reach, as one of our panelists rightly said, but actually appealing to people, appealing to young people, appealing to adults. That attraction piece, is a real challenge. And I think therefore that collective responsibility, I think that was you, Michael, apologies if it wasn't, but you talked about that collective responsibility to engage with communities and schools, for me, is one of those key messages from today. And I wonder if that environmental sustainability piece is quite a hook there. Does anyone else want to come in and answer any aspects of that question? I know other people referenced it in their presentations. Go for it, Jess.
Yeah, so obviously massively echo what Lara said. We've obviously working with young people, and it is amazing to sort of see some of the ideas that they come up with when you're in schools and colleges as well. But obviously, as I mentioned, National Highways have sort of designated Low Thames Crossing as a Pathfinder project. We are putting carbon and sort of reducing and our sort of road to net zero at the heart of everything we do. For lowest carbon strategy. And when I spoke about the market sounding questionnaire, a massive part of that was to really understand sort of local businesses and where they are at in their journey of, on the road to net zero, and how we can sort of change our tact and the way we support those and work with them to ensure that the whole region are on the sort of same footing as well. So it is a massive part of our procurement process. We are looking to completely change the culture and behaviour. A lot of sort of people say across the project that it's kind of treating it how we do health and safety. It's just a behaviour. It becomes second nature. So no matter what your role is within the project, or a resident touching the project or in surrounding areas, you understand what we're talking about, and you sort of take it home with you as well as in your job. So yeah, it is a massive part of the project, and we are really focused on sort of achieving that greenest road ever built. And the skills needed is very important. So by understanding where the businesses are locally, we can sort of understand where the gaps are and work with industry and education to address that need as well.
Yeah, great, thanks, Jess. Couldn't agree more. And yeah, some really useful points made. I'm just checking around some other questions. Michael, did you want to come in at that point?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what both Lara and Jess have said. But I think the interesting thing and the encouraging thing that it's almost a gimme, isn't it? Whether you talk to construction partners, architects, designers, or whatever, it's just built into the thinking and built into the planning. We did extensive engagement across the local community, and again, it was really interesting, the number of people that asked that question as well, and were really, really aware and switched on about it. The good thing from our point of view, among the most demanding people about it are our own staff, and I suppose because they work in a public health environment already, they are extremely aware. It's on their radar day to day. But in all the staff engagement, again, we're being asked about our plans. Could we do more? How we react to this, that, and the other. So I think the whole, what Lara has said, it's just on so many people's radars. You're not going to get away with it in a way. Not that you have to, because people expect it now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Michael. And I think my sense is from the provider's perspective, there's a fairly significant focus on ensuring we're equipped to be able to meet those needs in terms of the green skills or the green technologies, whether that's, you know, from a construction perspective or an environmental perspective. If I certainly speak for, you know, the Sussex, East Sussex colleges, where I've got a slightly greater awareness of what's been happening there. I think I can say that things are moving again in the right direction. Clearly a lot more that needs to be done. Thank you, David. Really, really good question. Aj, I think you've asked another question there whilst we're hearing those answers, and my guess would be this is quite a nice place for us to probably be finishing, unless anyone else wants to come in with anything else. And you've kind of picked up, I think, on my comment earlier about recruiting from the local community. And Aj, it's a bit of a generic question, probably for Louise, yourself, and Sharon and Helen, either to think about now, or for us probably to go away and consider, and likely both actually. And that is, Louise, from Core Data, for the eye-watering numbers of jobs needed, do we have enough young people coming through the school pipeline within our region to address it, or are we in need of attracting more young people in? It's a really good point, isn't it? Go for it, Louise.
It is a really good point, and I think it's not a precise science, so the honest answer is we don't yet know. It's a picture we're building up. It's that supply and demand side of things. We know there are likely to be shortages because we know that across all sectors there are shortages at the moment. I think we would probably say it's not just young people coming through, it's also the adult piece of making it as easy as it possibly can be for adults to reskill, kind of change their core skill sets, if that's kind of, you know, making them more green or whatever it might be, to help them transition really easily. I think adults is a key part of the picture for us. But I think, yeah, that there are likely to be shortages because of the kind of broader shortages, not just in sectors like construction and engineering, but across the board, really. So I think that's the $1 million question of what we're trying to quantify is how steep that shortfall is. And exactly as Ad says, do we therefore need to bring people in from outside in some cases to address some of those skill shortages? And I think that picture will become clearer as time goes on, and also as the projects become clearer in terms of their timescales and skills needs attached to them as well, and how they overlay with existing skills challenges. So I hope that wasn't too much of a waffly answer, but that's kind of where we're at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
If I can say, I think there is another audience as well, and we found, even to primary level, because one of the asks from us from the more senior schools was, can you get the youngsters more interested in science? Because initially, and then you think, okay, well that's where we start to actually grow our own scientists. Not that we got labs that do that, you know. Don't get any misconception like we don't have that, but you can start to grow the interest, and so some of the engagement that we do is right at a primary level, and it may just be they're playing with, sorry if I offend, slimy snot. They love it, but it's an introduction into science. And then you progress that through the different layers, different levels and different ages of the schools, adapting and changing that, and trying to, if you can, point them in a direction. Hey, you know, come up, you might want to come and work for us at a later stage, but to them it's not initially, it's work, it's fun.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, Michael. I totally agree. A lot of the research out there representing an industry, the massive skills gap, horticulture, a lot of the research out there that's been done by a number of the CITB equivalent bodies, but for that sector says that it's years 6 and 7 where you have the greatest influence on people's long-term career ambitions and aspirations. So that kind of age 9, 10, 11, 12. And I think in my experience, all too often, providers, employers, employer representative bodies focus on years 10 and 11. So the 15, 16-year-olds, that decision's been made a long time before. It's that transition, I think, between primary and secondary. So yeah, it's a really good point. And if we're going to talk about our collective might here, then just maybe it's looking at that target audience. Thank you. Sharon, did you want to come in a second ago?
It was just to expand slightly on something that Louise mentioned. So in terms of the data side of things, then absolutely it's not a perfect science and very much work in progress. But one of the things that we have started to try and do, and the benefit of being able to have these discussions across some of the biggest projects, is to understand that timeline mapping of the project and when different things will come online, because there will be peaks and troughs in terms of those needs. So the more we can actually map out that longer term pipeline and what it looks like, the more we can actually, once we get the right people are trained, then actually is keeping them as well, because they know that there is actually, you know, they're engaged on this project, but in a few years time when that, you know, tails off, others will ramp up. So really the more we can understand that longer term position and how the project interrelates, then actually we can attract people into the area if we need to, but also keep our own talent in the area. So we are trying to do some of that work, but absolutely not a perfect science and a lot of work, a lot more to do.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. And again, couldn't agree more. I think, yeah, some of that work that has been mapped and it's in the report, the Major Skills Project report, is really valuable. I think as that started to be fleshed out, looked at almost by sector, or kind of sector, kind of subject area, you know, from just purely from a construction or engineering perspective, that becomes ever more valuable. And then I think those previous points about mapping against that, the supply aspects, you know, how many school leavers will there be over the next 10 or 15 years? You know, how big is that kind of, you know, NEET or unemployed cohort? Because I think before you even get to the, I don't know, shall I say, let's say, you know, level 3 civils program that these combined major projects might need in 10 years time, there are transition pathways and journeys and courses that we need people on fairly soon. And, you know, another one of those key partners, just kind of final reflections for me really, are those other government departments. And, you know, again, if I speak from experience across Sussex, there are some fabulous, innovative, accessible employment programs that lead straight to work. And one of the biggest challenges we face is not getting the DWP referrals through, and therefore, you know, it would be great to hear from any of those project groups if any of you are working really successfully with the DWP, finding it, you're finding that you've kind of managed to you know, get that way in to those hard to reach groups, where that success can then be shared with others, because I do think hard to reach is hard to reach, and therefore that engagement with those other government departments who are meant to be providing these referrals is a really important part of this. I don't know if anyone is. If you're not, don't feel free to jump in. Don't necessarily need to jump in now. Great. I think we've covered everything. And unless Louise or Sharon or Helen are going to tell me otherwise, we're almost perfect time. I'm going to draw it to a close. As I've already said, you know, what an incredibly informative, you know, hour and a half update. Thank you very much to all those people that have joined the panel today from major projects and from kind of sector representative bodies such as CITB. I'm kind of in awe of the work that you're doing, really. The scale and scope and complexity here is incredible, and it really does take a huge amount of work looking up and ahead and out, as well as down at the detail. I for one am absolutely convinced that we are better together. One of our panel members put it quite simply, saying the demand for skills is considerable. The only way in my mind, you know, we can meet that is by working ever more collaboratively together. So thank you very much for your time today, providing us with those updates. Thank you very much to all of those of you that have joined us, tuned in, and posed some really good inquiring questions. And thanks as always to, you know, our CELEP team, Louise, Sharon and Helen. That action plan will be circulated very soon, as will a recording from today. Thanks very much for joining us, and keep an eye out, because I've got a feeling there'll be more of these and more updates to come. Thank you.